She left her fingers on his for a heartbeat, pulse against pulse, before sliding away, unsettled by the strength of her own response. "What now?" she asked. He exhaled, drawing back. "Now I teach you what the torchbearer may become, and you decide if destiny is a shackle or a sword." The doors opened abruptly. A kitchen steward entered, carrying a tray laden with bread, sliced fruit, and a pitcher of water. He glanced at Rhaegar with the respect shown to rulers and at Elora with quiet curiosity laced with something like hope. He set the tray down, bowed, and retreated without a word. Elora poured water into a stone cup, drank deeply. The crisp taste grounded her. Rhaegar watched. "The staff fear me, yet they stay. You asked a servant if they do. The answer is complicated. I feed them, shelter them, and keep war from their doors. Fear can coexist with loyalty." She swallowed another sip. "Loyalty built on fear isn't loyalty. What would you call it?" "Survival." His mouth curved ruefully. "Then perhaps survival is all any of us manage." She picked up a piece of bread, tore it in half, offered him a portion. He accepted, their fingers brushing crumbs free. They ate in companionable silence, and something inside Elora loosened, an uncoiling thread of tension she hadn't realized she carried. When the tray was empty, Rhaegar closed the ancient tome with a quiet thud. "You should rest. Today was heavy with truth." "I'd rather explore," she admitted. "Learn this place before it learns me." A ghost of amusement lit his eyes, curiosity sharper than fear. "Walk with me." They rose. He led her through arched doorways into corridors she hadn't seen, gallery halls lined with mosaics of stars, an indoor garden fed by geothermal vents where pale flowers glowed phosphorescent. Servants bowed as they passed, their gaze flicking from him to her with wary fascination. Rhaegar pointed out landmarks, the central furnace where weapon steel tempered, the scriptorium where scholars once charted lunar cycles to predict dragonflights. He spoke of centuries as if they were seasons, voice low, reverent for histories only he still remembered. Along the way they spoke of smaller things, her childhood memories of orchard blossoms, his fondness for the solitude of high cliffs at dawn. At times, they lapsed into silence, but it was no longer hostile. It felt, startlingly, like peace. When they emerged onto a courtyard ringed by obsidian pillars, the sky had deepened to late afternoon amber. A warm breeze carried hints of sulfur and pine. Shadows stretched long across the paving stones patterned in dragon-scale motifs. Elora closed her eyes, letting the breeze lift strands of hair from her neck. "For a prison, it's almost beautiful." "Beauty and danger seldom part ways," he said, watching her. She opened her eyes to find him studying her face with intense softness that prickled her skin. Embarrassed, she turned toward a low wall and peered into the scorched valley beyond. The wind shifted, carrying a rumble, faint at first, then stronger. Rhaegar tensed beside her. "What is it?" she asked. He scanned the sky. "A storm in the mountain's heart," he murmured. "I feel its pull." She faced him. "Does that matter?" Instead of answering, he closed his eyes, muscle taut in his jaw. When he opened them again, a flicker of gold brightened the brown. He exhaled sharply. "Sometimes the mountain reminds me who rules whom." He pressed fingers to the bridge of his nose. "Will you excuse me a moment?" He stepped away toward a side arch. Concern stirred in Elora's chest. Instinct urged her to follow, but she hesitated, unsure of boundaries. Before she could decide, he disappeared through the archway, leaving her beneath a sky gone suddenly heavy with charcoal clouds. The courtyard emptied in a rush of startled footsteps the moment Rhaegar vanished through the archway. Elora lingered, uneasy. Wind chased a swirl of ash across the flagstones, gusting through the colonnade with a sigh that sounded too much like a warning. Something felt off, as if the mountain had taken a deeper breath. She pressed a palm to her chest, sensing the uneasy stutter of her own heartbeat. Minutes passed. No one returned. Finally, concern overrode caution. She crossed to the archway and peered into the torchlit corridor beyond. The passage bent left, lit by a thin line of flame set into the floor. A faint vibration tremored through the stone, subtle, like distant thunder muffled by earth. She listened, then turned toward the direction Rhaegar had gone. A servant rounded a corner ahead, face drawn taut with fear. He nearly collided with her. "My lady, you shouldn't be here," he hissed, glancing toward the far end of the hall. "Where is he?" she asked. "In the forge wing. The pulse has him again." The servant's hands shook. "If you value your life, keep back." "Elora," she reminded gently. He blinked, confused by her correction. "Elora," he repeated, then hurried past, clutching an oil lamp that bobbed wildly with his stride. Forge wing. She pushed forward, pulse pounding at her temples. The corridor dipped downward, heat intensifying with each step. At a bend, she glimpsed flicker-lit walls painted orange by fire. The hiss of quenching water echoed, followed by a heavy clang, metal against stone, then a guttural growl that vibrated through her bones. Servants scurried out of a wide archway ahead, faces pale, robes flapping. None dared glance back. Elora slowed as she neared the opening, heart hammering. The forge beyond glowed like a pocket of sun trapped inside the mountain. Pillars of black stone framed cavernous space where anvils sat abandoned and brazier spat sparks skyward. In the center, Rhaegar knelt on one knee, braced by a trembling hand against the floor. His other arm reached across his chest as if restraining pain only he could feel. Scales shimmered along his shoulders, crawling over skin in restless waves. Steam rose from his back where fabric tore beneath surfacing wings. "Stay back," he snarled without looking. Voice deeper, half-broken, it rumbled like distant quakes. An ember rolled from his mouth on the word back. Elora took one step inside. Heat washed over her, yet she didn't flinch. "Rhaegar." "Go." His head bowed, hair hanging loose, molten light glinting off horns that hadn't been there moments before. They sprouted along his temples, curving backward, half-formed. She swallowed against sudden dryness in her throat. What triggered it? He laughed, a sound cracked by agony. "The pulse. My temper. Does it matter? Leave." Scales rippled down his arms, melding with human skin at forearms before fading, only to flare again. Muscle bunched. Stone under his hand scorched black. A glance at his profile revealed fangs indenting his lower lip from within. Blood tinged with sparks dripped onto the floor. Elora stepped closer. "You don't want to hurt anyone. I know that." A low growl answered. He lurched to his feet, stumbling, wings half-sprouted and skeletal, webbing flickering between existence and ash. He slammed a fist into a broken anvil, splitting it with a metallic shriek. Lava veins beneath the floor brightened in reply. Elora's pulse banged against her ribs. Smoke choked the air, but she edged forward anyway. "Look at me." Rhaegar's head jerked, eyes blazing molten gold. Recognition flickered, followed by panic. "I said leave." "No." She kept her tone steady, though her legs felt water-light. "You're not alone in this." He bared fangs. "Alone keeps you alive. Fear keeps you alone." She shot back. He recoiled as if struck by the truth of it. A wail ripped through him, half-roar, half-wordless grief. His knees buckled. Elora raced forward, catching his arm. Heat radiated off scales that pebbled his bicep. Pain lanced her palm, but she held on. Skin sizzled faintly where they touched, yet she gripped tighter, refusing to let go. Rhaegar snarled, twisting away, then froze when her other hand cupped his jaw. Flames mirrored in her eyes. His breathing hitched, muscles shaking. The wings sagged, collapsing into sparks that evaporated before touching ground. "Feel the stone under your feet," she said, voice soft but unwavering. "Feel the air in your lungs, the weight of my hands. Be here." His gaze darted across her face, looking for fear perhaps. She gave him none, only stubborn calm. He inhaled raggedly, horns receding beneath skin. The scales smoothed, retracting, until only scorched patches of cloth and sweat remained. When at last his breaths quieted, the forge's fire shrank as if the mountain exhaled relief through him. Silence settled, broken only by the tintinnabulation of cooling metal and the distant hiss of vents. Steam ghosted off his shoulders. He sagged forward, forehead brushing hers. She heard his heart, wild, then slowing, echoing inside his chest. "Why?" he rasped, breath hot on her cheek. "Do you stay?" She eased her burned hand from his arm, wincing, then rested it against his sternum. "Because beneath all this fire, you were alone. I know that feeling too well." He pulled back slightly, enough to look at her palm. Angry blisters bubbled across the skin. Anguish twisted his features. "You're hurt. I'll live." He swallowed. One trembling hand slid over hers. Cold returned where scales had been, and with it, a faint incandescent glow. A pulse rippled from his palm into hers, cool, tingling, like spring water washing over scorched ground. The burn faded to pink, the pain easing. She stared, speechless. "Dragon blood heals," he murmured, "when it chooses." He let go, trembling so hard his fingers shook. "Forgive me." "For what, fighting yourself?" She studied his face. "Or daring to trust someone else not to run?" He took a staggering step away as though distance might steady him. "You saw what I become. I saw what you were afraid to become." She moved forward again until inches separated them. "But you didn't lose control?" He scoffed. "Only because you risked yourself." "Not just me, you fought too." She lowered her gaze, remembering the seared imprint of scales under her hand. "Is that what desire does? Makes the curse worse?" He blinked, startled. Heat flared in his cheeks. "Who said anything about desire?" "Your confession earlier. Rage or desire, your words, not mine." Silence stretched between them, thick with everything unspoken. Finally, he exhaled. "That library conversation was reckless." "Maybe honesty always is." She tilted her head. "Tell me something else reckless." He stared, torn between caution and need, then said, "When you touched me, it rooted me to the present." The dragon obeyed. "No mortal has ever done that." Her breath caught in her throat. "Good to know." He offered a broken laugh, then winced, pain reminding him of muscles torn mid-shift. She reached to steady him. He didn't resist. Together they left the forge's blistering heat, crossing back into cooler corridors. Servants peered from hiding spots, eyes wide, relief blooming as the pair passed without fire or smoke trailing them. At a small antechamber near the courtyard, Rhaegar slowed, leaning one shoulder against the wall. Alora guided him to a bench carved from dragon bone, smooth white arc that glowed faintly. She sat beside him, drawn by the gray pallor creeping over his face. "You heal others," she said, "but not yourself." "I heal," he corrected, "but the shift drains me. Larger wounds take time." Instinctively, she lifted his left hand. Minor cuts streaked across knuckles from striking the anvil. Without thinking, she brushed her lips lightly over torn skin. Heat flared under her cheeks, but she didn't pull back until the bleeding slowed. Meeting his gaze, she found him staring, astonished. Embarrassment surfaced. "Old folk remedy," she mumbled. A slow smile curved his mouth, gentle, almost shy. "It helps." She felt the sofa's smooth edge dig into her back and suddenly became aware of how narrow the bench was, of the way their knees touched. She stood quickly. "I should find water for you." "Stay," he said, the words soft yet carrying more power than a shouted command. He struggled to his feet before she could protest. "I'm not fragile, merely tired." "You nearly tore yourself apart." He half shrugged. "And nearly torched you, yet here we are. Because we trusted each other for a moment." She folded her arms, needing distance that walls couldn't provide. "When rage or desire comes again, Will you trust me the same way? He lifted a hand, fingers hovering near her cheek without touching. That depends. Will you still see me? Or only the beast? She closed the space, letting his knuckles brush her jaw. I see the man fighting for his humanity. His thumb traced a path behind her ear, resting against the back of her neck. Then perhaps there is hope. They stood suspended in that fragile hush until Elora's stomach growled loudly enough to shatter the spell. She laughed in mild mortification. A grin cracked across Rhaegar's face, wider than she had yet seen, revealing a hint of fanged incisor still sharper than human teeth. The expression made him younger, boyish. For a beat, everything, prophecy, flames, curses, fell away. What? He asked, eyes dancing. I'm starving, she confessed, hand against her abdomen. He chuckled. Forgive me. I forget human needs when embers roar in my skull. He motioned to a passing servant, a slender man who carried a basket of folded towels. The servant bowed, eyes darting from the scorch marks on Rhaegar's torn tunic to Elora's flushed cheeks. See that the lady receives a meal in her chamber, Rhaegar instructed. Then he added, quieter, she will stay there for the evening, under protection. The servant nodded eagerly, eager to obey and retreat from the dangerous calm. He scurried off. Rhaegar turned toward Elora. You should rest, he said, though longing colored the words, as if he wished rest were a shared pursuit rather than solitude. She nodded, though part of her rebelled at leaving him alone after such torment. And you? He glanced down at his ruined shirt, tugging the fabric away from unhealed scorches. I'll survive. The mountain's forge isn't the only crucible to mend my wounds. She reached for his damaged sleeve. Let me help you change at least. He caught her wrist gently. Not yet. The light in his eyes dimmed to caution. I need solitude to master what remains of the shift. If you stayed, control might fray again. The words fell between them, heavy and undeniable. Desire, a curse trigger. She exhaled. Then I'll wait until you call. His fingers lingered longer than necessary before releasing her. Soon. They walked together until her corridor branched from the main passage. There, he paused. Torches painted overlapping shadows on his face. Elora, he said, voice a hush. I owe you more than I can name. Then live, she replied, and let me decide the rest. He bowed his head, then turned away. She watched him retreat until a corner swallowed his tall frame. Only then did she slip into her chamber. Corrin had already placed a tray on the low table, assorted cheeses, honeyed figs, warm flatbread, a steaming bowl of spiced broth. Elora thanked her softly. The maid smiled, quick and nervous, and left. Alone, Elora poured water into a cup, staring at her reflection rippling on the surface. She could still feel Rhaegar's cheek under her palm, the thrum of dragon fire beneath his skin. The moment her lips had touched his torn knuckles, replayed again and again until heat climbed her neck. She pressed cold metal of the goblet to her forehead, trying to slow her thoughts. But thoughts ignored her commands. They tumbled in frantic loops. His pain, his gratitude, that near loss of control when desire coincided with shifting. The way his laughter sounded like embers popping in a hearth. The way he'd said soon. By the time she finished half the broth, dusk had settled, casting amethyst shadows through the window. She crawled into bed and lifted the duvet, only to freeze at the sight of an object resting on the pillow. A small pendant, obsidian carved into two interlocking flames, threaded on a delicate chain of dragon steel. A note lay beside it, ink scrawled in firm strokes. Wear this when you feel alone. It will guide me to you and perhaps remind you fire can warm as well as burn. Elora ran her thumb over the pendant's cool surface. It pulsed once against her fingertip, faint as a heartbeat. She slipped the chain around her neck, settling the weight between her collarbones. It warmed instantly, as if it knew her skin. Curling beneath the blankets, she closed her eyes and let exhaustion sweep through muscles and bone. But sleep tarried, withheld by a new awareness that tightened her chest. The bond was no longer a threat alone. It was a promise, uncertain and terrifyingly bright. She cupped the pendant, whispering a silent oath to herself and to whatever fate listened. "I won't run from the fire," she murmured, "not anymore." Slowly, lulled by distant forge rumbles and steady mountain rhythm, her breathing evened, and darkness wrapped her in dreams that smelled of cedar smoke, tasted of honeyed figs, and echoed with a dragon's broken laugh. Moonlight seeped through a narrow slit in the bedchamber wall, silvering the dust and turning every shadow into deep blue velvet. Elora surfaced from sleep gasping, her heart beating an urgent tattoo against her ribs. Flames still licked the edges of her dream, Marissa laughing while the manor's orchards burned, Aldrich staring through her as though she were smoke. She pushed herself upright and pressed a hand to her sternum. The pendant Rhaegar had given her lay hot against her skin, warmer than body heat, as though it pulsed with its own life. She tossed back the covers and swung her feet to the floor. Night's hush lay heavy, disturbed only by the occasional distant grind of stone as the mountain shifted. The pendant throbbed again, gentle but insistent. She slipped the chamber door open. The corridor torches had been dimmed to coals, casting a faint orange glow that barely reached the ceiling rafters. A breeze, smelling faintly of hot minerals, carried a distant clang, metal on stone, followed by silence. Curiosity tugged her forward. Barefoot, she padded down the hall, one hand brushing the wall for orientation. She passed the empty gallery where mosaics of starlight dragons reflected dim glints even in low light. Then the quiet indoor garden, glowing faintly from bioluminescent blossoms. Each step cooled the pendant's warmth, like following a thread through a labyrinth until tug met source. At a tall arched doorway, the warmth flared. She pushed inside and found herself in the same library where they'd spoken earlier, though now its hearth had burned low to embers. Shadows curled around towering stacks. At the far window, Rhaegar stood, arms braced on the sill, the pale glow limning his broad shoulders. He turned when she entered, eyes bright. Even in near darkness, their golden undertone glowed. "Elora," he said softly, voice rough as if woken from thought rather than sleep. "I didn't summon you." She lifted the pendant. "This did." His gaze dropped to the obsidian flames. "It responds when it senses distress." "I had a nightmare," she admitted, crossing the stone floor that had absorbed just enough heat to keep her toes from chilling. "Not about dragons, about my home." He gave a faint nod, hand gesturing toward a cushioned chaise near the hearth. She sat. He knelt to stoke the embers with an iron rod. Sparks spiraled upward, illuminating his profile, sharp lines softened by fatigue. When flames licked fresh wood, he settled across from her on a low footstool, folding long arms over his knees. "Tell me," he said, eyes never leaving hers. She picked at the fringe of her night shift sleeve. "Marissa torched the orchards. My father stood in the smoke and watched. I tried to reach him, but with each step I sank deeper into ash. I kept calling his name. He didn't hear." Her voice caught. "I woke choking." Rhaegar's hand twitched as though he meant to reach for her but thought better. "Nightmares borrow shapes we fear most. Fire is my oldest terror, too." "Fire?" Surprise flickered. She'd assumed fire was his ally, not his fear. He lowered his gaze. "The curse was forged in it. Flames remind me of shackles as much as strength." He rubbed a thumb across his opposite palm in a restless arc. "I stood in a courtyard like this when I first lost control. Watched people I loved flee from me. Their faces haunted my dreams for decades." The fire popped. Elora leaned forward, elbows on her knees. "You say shield them from war, but you also shield them from you, don't you?" He met her gaze, acceptance mixing with sorrow. "A dragon's mercy can still burn." "I don't believe you want to burn." she said. His lips curved, sad and grateful. You believe in me quickly. Maybe because no one believed in me. She sighed, looking to the window where ash twirled under moonlight. My father disappeared behind Marissa's lies. When she offered me as tribute, he thought he was being noble. I keep wondering if I hated him or pitied him more. What answer have you found? She shook her head. None that settles. He stood, crossed the space, and sank onto the chaise beside her. The cushion dipped, bringing their shoulders close. Heat radiated from him, like from the hearth itself, but gentler. A steady warmth that coaxed away lingering chill. Your father sees through borrowed eyes, he said. I know what that blindness feels like. My betrayer convinced me her fear was love until fear won. You see clearly now, she said. Sometimes clarity comes too late. He angled toward her. But your clarity is new, still forming. Don't let bitterness carve it to pieces. She smoothed her braid against her shoulder. What do I do with the pieces I already have? Forge something new. His fingers brushed her wrist where the pendant chain disappeared into cloth. Dragon steel bends only with the hottest flame and the most patient hand. Hearts do too. The touch was light, almost accidental, yet a jolt ran up her arm. She lifted her gaze. Rhaegar, I don't see a monster, she whispered. I see a man fighting to remember himself. Something fierce and fragile sparked in his eyes like glass that had just cooled from molten. He inhaled, the breath snagging. You are the first to say that without trembling. She swallowed. My hands are steady even if my heart isn't. He smiled, a slow, hesitant curve. Steady hands can tame storms. The silence that followed was not awkward. It hummed with possibilities. The library's dim shapes seemed to lean closer, eavesdropping. Outside, the wind rose in a low sigh against the windows, as though the mountain itself exhaled. Rhaegar's hand remained on her wrist. He turned it palm up, tracing the healed skin where blister scars had nearly vanished. I still feel the moment you touched me in the forge, he murmured. A anchor thrown into raging sea. Her throat tightened. She covered his hand with her free one, letting their fingers weave. The gesture felt both daring and necessary. His shoulders eased, the tension of centuries sliding off inch by inch. He shifted, facing her fully. If desire can kindle the curse, he said softly, perhaps trust can quell it. Her pulse fluttered. Maybe both together can balance. He moved closer, the space between them down to a finger's breadth. She thought he meant to kiss her, every part of her braced for it. Yet he paused, gold eyes searching, asking without words. She mirrored his stillness. Want flickered through her, bright as forge sparks, but a sharper need guided one small action. She lifted his hand, pressing her lips to the center of his palm, the way she had kissed his knuckles hours before. The simple contact lit heat under her skin, though he made no move. When she lowered his hand, he exhaled shakily. You undo me, Alora. Not my aim. I know. He tapped a finger under her chin, gentle, tipping her face up. Which is why it happens. They stayed like that until the wind outside lulled. At length, Rhaegar rose. I should return you to your chamber before dawn steals what little rest remains. He offered his hand, palm turned upward in silent invitation. She placed her fingers in his grip closed warmly around them. They walked the corridors without hurry. Lamps guttered low. Once, their shoulders brushed, and he didn't pull away. A servant, half asleep, passed and halted, eyes widening at their clasped hands. Rhaegar inclined his head. The servant scurried off, no doubt to whisper. At her door he released her fingers but kept her gaze. Moonlight cut across the hall, framing him in silver and copper hues. She reached up, resting her palm against his chest where the faint beat of his heart echoed. I don't fear the dragon, she said. And I, he whispered, hand covering hers, fear losing what humanity you reflect back at me. She rose onto her toes, brushing her cheek against his for the barest second, enough to feel stubble and warmth, to breathe ash and cedar. His breath caught, chest rising beneath her palm. She stepped back before either barrier or caution collapsed. "Good night, Rhaegar." "Good night, Elora." He watched her disappear inside before turning away, stride measured, shoulders squared, as if braced for battles within as much as beyond. Elora shut the door quietly. The room felt different. Less cage, more cocoon. She leaned against the panel, fingers tracing the pendant. It no longer burned. It throbbed soothingly, mirroring her heartbeat. She crossed to the window. Stars glittered through thinning ash, constellations she didn't recognize. Somewhere in the fortress, stone scraped as Rhaegar's presence retreated to solitary corridors. Pulling the chain free, she let the pendant rest over the linen of her nightdress, just above her thudding heart. She thought of trust and desire, rage and quiet. In her mind, Marissa's poisoned words withered. Aldrich's distance shrank to a shadow against this new unfolding horizon. Sleep came gently this time. It found her curled on her side, pendant aglow, a half-smile, lingering. She dreamed of walking through fire without pain, hand in hand with a man whose laughter no longer cracked, only warmed. Far below, the mountain's pulse slowed, soothed by a balance it hadn't felt in ages. Sunlight spilled across the chamber's polished floor in soft ripples, as if it hesitated to disturb the quiet. Elora drifted awake on a breath scented faintly with cedar smoke and the lingering spice of last night's hearth. Her eyes opened to the familiar mosaic of obsidian dragons carved into the ceiling, but everything felt subtly altered, lighter, alive with possibility. She lay still, letting the warmth seep into her bones, replaying those twilight hours in the library. The hush of turning pages, Rhaegar's voice carrying the weight of centuries, the softness in his eyes when he kissed her as though afraid the moment itself might shatter. She pressed her fingers to her lips, half expecting heat to rise from skin, half fearing it wouldn't, and found a shy smile instead of flames. The pendant at her throat had cooled to a gentle throb that matched her pulse, a reminder that the night had been real, that trust had sprouted in soil she once thought scorched beyond hope. A quiet knock pulled her into motion. She slipped from bed, smoothing the folds of a simple dove-gray gown someone had set on a chair. When she cracked the door, Corrin stood waiting, cheeks pink as dawn. The young servant bobbed her head, eyes darting between Elora's face and the pendant that glimmered in morning light. "Good day," Corrin whispered. "Lord Rhaegar invites you to breakfast. He said you should see the sun across the ash plain." Invites. Elora's heart fluttered. "Thank you, Corrin. Give me a moment." She braided her hair quickly, hands trembling less from nerves than from eagerness. As she followed Corrin through quiet corridors, the fortress felt changed. Torches burned brighter, air carried a whisper of excitement, as if stone walls had overheard her secret and conspired to keep it safe. Servants they passed bowed deeper than before, offering small smiles rather than muted fear. It made her step lighter, yet guilt pricked. One night had granted her gentler paths, while villagers outside still lived under Marissa's shadow. She wouldn't forget. Corrin stopped before a pair of iron-framed doors that opened onto a narrow terrace. Heated breeze brushed Elora's cheeks as she stepped outside. The world below spread in layers of dusky red and umber, lava flows cooling into black rivers against slopes dusted in silver ash. Beyond the hazy horizon, peaks rose like dragon spines silhouetted against a watercolor sky. Rhaegar waited beside a low table set with simple fare: dates, warm bread, a pot of steaming herb tea. He wore a loose, dark shirt unlaced at the collar, sleeves rolled to his elbows. Morning light caught faint scales still lingering along his forearms like memories of the night's turmoil. When he turned, the warmth in his smile eclipsed the sunlight. "I was starting to fear I'd eaten all the bread," he said. A laugh escaped her, surprised and free. "And leave me to starve?" I doubt that. Never intentionally. He gestured to a cushioned bench opposite his. Join me before the breeze steals the warmth. She sat, noticing a mug already waiting where he must have known she would choose. Steam curled up, carrying mint and something citrus. He poured tea into her cup before his own, fingers steady, as though small courtesies grounded him against deeper tremors. They ate a date each in companionable silence. It felt natural to speak quietly here, as if the mountains themselves listened. Tell me a memory, he said, tearing bread and passing her half. Something before this place, before your stepmother wove shadows. She smiled, licking honey from her thumb. When I was 7, I raced my father through our orchard rows at dusk. The blossoms were falling, and he said if I caught one mid-air, I'd keep its wish. I jumped, caught 2, gave him one of the wishes. Her smile faltered. I don't think either came true. Rhaegar considered her. Perhaps they still can. Wishes can be stubborn things. And you? She asked. Before betrayal? His gaze slid to the horizon. There was a cliff overlooking the southern sea. Dragons would dive at sunrise, skimming waves until the surf turned gold beneath their wings. I would join them, feel the spray, cool scales still warm from dawn's fire. He paused. I haven't flown like that since. Elora pictured him soaring above breaking waves, shadow and flame, greeting morning, and her breath caught with unexpected yearning. Part for him, part for the world stolen by fear. She reached across the table, brushing the back of his hand. He flipped his palm, letting fingers entwine with hers for a quiet heartbeat. The terrace door banged open, a guard bowed, armor clinking. My lord, an urgent report. Rhaegar's fingers tensed around hers before he released. Speak. Riders sighted on the lower pass, Lord Aldrich's colors, nearly 50 men. The tea turned ash bitter in Elora's mouth. He came, she murmured. The guard's gaze flicked to her, pity and hesitation entwined. The lead messenger claims they are here to negotiate your release, my lady. She almost laughed at the absurdity. Marissa's lies traveled faster than truth. Rhaegar rose, shoulders broadening as if he absorbed the news into muscle and bone. The guard bowed again and retreated. Rhaegar poured fresh tea, no longer calm. The liquid trembled in the spout. This was sooner than expected. Elora, he stepped to the rail, gripping the stone. If they fire on the fortress, lives will be lost. My father isn't a warmonger, she said, though doubt crept in. Marissa twists his view, but perhaps I can untwist it. Rhaegar's jaw flexed. He'll see you as hostage. Then let him see I'm not. He faced her fully, heat simmering in his eyes. You wish to stand before arrows and spears? I wish to stand before my father, she said, voice steady. I can't hide behind walls while war brews on my name. He stepped closer. Your courage both terrifies and heals me. And your trust gives mine strength. He exhaled, lifting her fingers to his lips for a fleeting kiss. Finish eating, he said, attempting calm. We'll need every scrap of strength. She swallowed the rest of her bread even as appetite vanished, sensing that breakfast's sweetness belonged to a different morning born only minutes ago. They left the terrace through quieter halls. Servants pressed themselves to walls, whispering prayers or rumors Elora couldn't catch. Rhaegar paused at a branching corridor. I must ready the sentries. Meet me in the West Library when you've gathered your thoughts. Without waiting for agreement, he strode off, cloak swirling like shadow clinging to flame. Elora watched until he disappeared, heart battering her ribs. Then she walked alone, mind thundering with images of Aldrich's stern face and Marissa's cold smile. Passing a polished shield hung for decoration, she saw her reflection, eyes anxious yet alight with something fierce. She straightened her spine. No one would tell her story today. She would speak it herself. Corrin appeared with a fresh shawl. Take this. The wind on the wall is sharp. And your pendant. Hold it if fear creeps in. It glows brighter the braver your heart. Elora clasped Corin's hands. Thank you. When this is over, I hope you'll show me that orchard of crystal flowers. Only if you promise not to leave us, Corin whispered. Elora hesitated. I promise to return, she said, realizing how true the words felt. Hold the fortress until then. She hurried toward the west wing, pendant warming like a heartbeat leading her on. Elora found the west library hushed as a church of stone and ember. High above, colored panes cast molten streaks across geometric floor tiles, while soot-dark beams arched like ribs overhead. She paused, listening. No footfalls, no echo but her breathing, and realized how easily the fortress swallowed sound. In that quiet, doubt stretched its claws. What if the prophecy demanded more than she could give? What if her presence worsened everything? She closed her eyes, pressing thumb and forefinger to the warm pendant. Its steady pulse calmed the tremor building in her chest. A door hidden behind a tapestry parted with a soft rasp. Rhaegar emerged, rolling his sleeves as though he'd shoveled 10 tons of memory. His hair, still loose from morning breeze, framed eyes burnished by determination and worry. He crossed to her in 3 strides. I was delayed, he said, voice low. A dozen preparations, none with certain outcome. I'm here, she replied. He studied her face, searching for fear. Whatever he saw steadied him. With a small nod, he motioned for her to follow through the hidden door. The passage beyond angled sharply downward, lit by torches guttering blue. At each turn, sigils inscribed in dragon tongue glowed faintly, and the air grew warm enough to redden skin. Finally, they reached a circular chamber carved from charred basalt. Bookshelves hugged the walls, but the focus was a stone pedestal at the center where a scroll lay unfurled, its parchment shimmering faint silver. Rhaegar gestured to the pedestal. The prophecy. Elora stepped forward. The scroll's edges drifted as if stirred by an unseen breeze. Intricate script spiraled around an illustration. A dragon knotted in chains of thorny vines. A woman cloaked in flame holding a torch that bled both light and darkness. The ink gleamed like starlight captured in water. He began translating, voice steady but quiet, as though each word carried fragile weight. The dragon bound in chains of blood and betrayal shall find release only within the willing heart of Flame's bearer. Yet when heart ignites heart, the world must bend, toward dawn or dusk, decided by love, sealed by sacrifice. He paused, exhaling slowly, then continued. Should the bearer's love hold steadfast, dragon and flame shall forge peace reborn. Should fear fracture love, fire will consume, first hearts, then kingdoms. Silence filled the chamber thicker than smoke. Elora ran fingertips along a border of minuscule dragon glyphs. They glimmered, warming skin. Rhaegar spoke into that hush. For centuries I prayed the bearer would never appear. I feared any bond would doom both of us. She lifted her gaze. But I'm here now. Yes. He braced hands on the pedestal. And each hour since you arrived, the curse has stirred more violently, because my heart is no longer stone, Elora. It beats where I once thought it dead, and the fire inside answers. Her pulse answered too, racing. And if the prophecy is right, our bond will decide salvation or ruin. He met her eyes. I would spare you that burden if I could, but fate, it's a forge hotter than lava. She reached across the scroll, resting her hand over his. I choose whether I stay, not fate, and I'm still here. His shoulders slackened, relief and fear woven together. I don't deserve that faith. She squeezed his fingers. Maybe neither of us needs to deserve. We simply need to choose. He inhaled as though her words drew fresh air into centuries' stagnant lungs. Moving slowly, he circled the pedestal until they stood inches apart. The scroll's glow reflecting in both pairs of eyes. He raised a hand, fingertips ghosting along the curve of her jawline, giving her a chance to retreat. She didn't. Heat blossomed where he touched, not scorching but alive. steady as heartbeat, echo of pendant. Their breaths tangled. Rhaegar's thumb traced the hollow behind her ear. If love fuels the curse, we tread dangerous ground. Then teach me to dance on embers. A soft laugh escaped him, part wonder, part surrender. He tilted his forehead to hers. She felt the thrumming engine of dragonfire beneath his skin, yet the warmth soothed rather than seared. "Tell me you're certain," he whispered. "I'm terrified," she answered, honest and clear. But certainty feels overrated compared to trust. His lips parted in a shaky smile before brushing hers, light as ash, tentative. She rose on toes, meeting the kiss with equal gentleness, and sparks skittered along nerves. A hush welled up, like the fortress held its breath, every molten vein, listening. When their lips met again, the kiss deepened, slow and reverent. She traced the nape of his neck, where human skin met faint ridge of scales. He trembled, but neither horn nor claw emerged, only warmth. When they broke apart, her breath came fast. Gold flared in his irises, bright but controlled. He rested his brow against hers. "You steady the fire." "And you set mine alight," she said, voice ragged but calm. He chuckled softly, but worry etched lines at his eyes. "Strong emotion accelerates everything. We must learn balance." "Then we start now." A sudden knock cracked the chamber door. Rhaegar straightened, tension snapping back. Elora's heart lurched, heat and vulnerability retreating behind ribs. A guard entered, bowing low. "Forgive intrusion. Scouts report Lord Aldrich's party has reached the Sulphur Bridge. His herald requests parley under banner of peace." Rhaegar's jaw flexed. "Prepare the outer courtyard, minimal arms displayed. I'll speak with Elora before we respond." The guard bowed and left. Alone again, Elora steadied herself. The bridge is narrow. If swords are drawn, many could fall. "I'll ensure it doesn't reach that," he said. He wrapped her fingers in his, gaze darkening with protective resolve. "But you should not face him alone." "I must." She smoothed his sleeve where muscles tensed beneath cloth. "If my father sees you first, he'll see threat before truth." He closed his eyes briefly, fighting an argument he feared would patronize her. When he opened them, resolve replaced worry. "Then I stand near, hidden until you call." She nodded. "We speak truth. That's all. I pray truth proves stronger than fear." He tucked a stray strand of hair behind her ear, then released her hand. Together, they climbed the spiraling corridor. Along the way, messengers hustled, clamor echoing. Elora caught snatches of talk. Archers stationed on western turrets, healers preparing infirmary rooms, servants lighting extra torches against oncoming dusk. Yet an undercurrent of hope rippled. The master walks calmer today. The lady talks to him like sunrise touches stone. They paused at an armory alcove where Rhaegar shed his dark shirt, exchanging it for leather reinforced with scaled plating at shoulders. He caught Elora watching, and offered half a smile. "Symbolic only. My skin is stronger." "I know," she said, but the sight of him armoring stirred both comfort and unease. He strapped a curved dagger to his belt, obsidian blade etched with runes, and glanced at her plain gown. Silence communicated what he wouldn't say. She bore no armor. She lifted the pendant in silent reply. "It may not stop arrows," he murmured. "It stops me from fleeing," she said. "That matters more." A faint roar rumbled through the walls, distant magma shifting. He guided her onward to a tall pair of bronze doors crested with dragon motifs. Guards swung them open to reveal a vast courtyard built into the mountain's face. Evening shadow crept across stone parapets while volcanic light painted clouds in shades of blood orange. At the far rim, a narrow bridge arched over a steaming ravine. On its opposite side, 50 riders clustered among banners emblazoned with Dalcair colors, 2 silver crescents, on a field of green. Elora's breath hitched. She recognized the black warhorse at the front, recognized, too, the man atop it, though distance blurred features. Lord Aldrich sat straight-backed, armor polished, but plain. Rhaegar guided her to a vantage near the bridge entrance, his presence a steady heat at her left shoulder, though he remained one pace behind Shadow. Sentries lined the walls overhead, bows unstrung to show restraint yet ready if peace broke. A lone herald rode to the midpoint, voice amplified by mountain acoustics. "We come for Lady Elora of House Dalcair. Release her, and no blood will stain this day." Elora stepped forward, pulse thrumming. The breeze snapped her shawl. Across the ravine, Aldrich removed his helmet, revealing hair more gray than brown. Eyes rimmed red. Marissa sat astride a pale mare just behind him, cloaked in regal crimson. Even at a distance, Elora felt the chill in her stepmother's gaze. The herald called again, impatience lacing tone. "Our lord demands proof the lady lives." Elora raised her voice, praying it would carry true. "I live." Gasps traveled down the enemy line. Aldrich leaned toward Marissa, hissing words lost to distance. Elora took another step, hands open. "I am not held captive," she said. "I choose to remain." Aldrich urged his horse forward until hooves clanged on the bridge's first stones. "Elora," he called, pain raw in 2 syllables. "Step aside, child. We've come to take you home." Home. The word cut deeper than arrow. "My home burned long before dragons, father." Marissa saw to that. He flinched. Marissa's lips tightened. She nudged her horse alongside Aldrich's, voice pitched to carry. "This fortress twists minds with dark magic. See how your daughter speaks against us?" Elora felt Rhaegar's tension rise. She reached behind, squeezing his hand, a silent plea for restraint. He eased, those scales rippled beneath his collar. "I speak only what's true," Elora called. "And I beg for peace. Lay down arms, cross unarmed, and meet me. We can speak without swords." Marissa laughed, a brittle sound. "So the dragon teaches courtesy now?" Elora ignored her. "Father, please, no one must be hurt." Aldrich looked up, really looked, perhaps for first time since offering her up 10 years prior. He studied her posture, her clear gaze, the absence of chains. Conflict pinched his brow. Rhaegar moved up beside Elora, still half in shadow, voice low. "He might listen if I show respect." She nodded, though her stomach lurched with fear of misstep. Rhaegar stepped into full view. Gasps rippled across the riders. Even from afar, his presence commanded awe. Tall, broad, eyes reflecting faint gold. Yet he bowed, one hand across chest, the gesture formal. "Lord Dalcair," he said, voice carrying calm steel, "I swear upon ancient flame your daughter has suffered no harm. She is under my protection and free will." Aldrich's eyes flicked to Marissa, who spat words Elora couldn't hear. The soldiers tightened formation, tension coiling. Elora reached forward, but Rhaegar's hand caught her wrist, subtle, grounding. In that moment, torchlight flared as the sun dipped behind peaks, casting her silhouette across the bridge. She faced the father who once raced her beneath blooming boughs now long burned. Heart hammering, she drew breath. Ready to break the spell Marissa wove, ready to speak from love, not fear. Behind her, Rhaegar's voice passed like warm wind. "You're not alone." She believed him. Elora stepped to the very edge of the parapet where the stone tapered, boots inches from the yawning gap that fell to steam and molten glow. Wind lifted strands of her hair, tossing them across her cheeks. A hush spread among the riders on the opposite side, as if her small figure alone held them at bay. She drew a breath that tasted of ash and mountain air, and projected her voice using everything the fortress's acoustics would grant her. "Father," she called, steady though her pulse hammered, "look at me. No chains, no bruises, no fear. The man beside me saved me from a fate you once believed would protect the realm. I ask you now, protect it with me." rather than against us. Aldrich's helm hung at his side, gauntleted knuckles white around its rim, his brow furrowed, gaze flicking from her face to Rhaegar's towering presence. Marissa whispered in his ear, disdain carved into every elegant line of her mouth. Even from the fortress wall, Elora could read the story in those lips. A dragon's thrall, a cursed seduction, the enemy at the gate. She felt Marissa's poison curling through Aldrich's mind, and anger stirred, steady, deliberate like the heat beneath stone waiting to burst. Rhaegar's hand pressed lightly to Elora's back, grounding without claiming. Gold glimmered in his pupils, but his voice stayed level. Lord Dalcair, I give my word, and dragon word is no small oath, that your daughter has chosen her path freely. Let us speak without steel between us. An uneasy murmur rippled among the soldiers. Some shifted, uncertain, while others stared at Rhaegar as if he might sprout wings any moment. Aldrich cleared his throat. Words from a monster mean little to men whose villages remember flame. He shouted. I am a monster where monsters are made, Rhaegar returned, not flinching. But I choose today what burns and what does not. Marissa snorted, voice carrying like cracked crystal. Listen to him spin tales, my lord. Elora stands under enchantment. Look how that jewel glows at her throat. Elora clutched the pendant. Pale fire pulsed in its depths. It is no enchantment of domination, she called. It is a promise of protection. Only fear twists protection into chains. Her gaze drilled into Marissa. Fear like yours. Marissa's face tightened as though muscles were strings pulled too taut. She spurred her mare forward a step. Bold words for a girl who scrubbed floors while others built kingdoms. Elora's cheeks flushed, but she let the heat flow into resolve. Perhaps scrubbing floors taught me to see the dirt you hide beneath your silks. Several soldiers choked back laughter. Marissa shot them a glare. Aldrich raised a gauntleted hand for silence. Enough, he barked. Then softer to Elora. Daughter, if you truly choose this path, walk to me across the bridge. Speak without the dragon behind you. Rhaegar's hand stiffened, but Elora touched it, reassuring. Let me, she whispered. I will follow at a distance, he murmured. At the first hint of harm. You'll see me raise my hand, she said, but trust me. He exhaled fire-warm air. Go, bravely, torchbearer. She slipped through the gate that led to the narrow bridge. Below, heat shimmered in waves, and sulphurous steam hissed around stone supports. Each plank beneath her boots vibrated with the heartbeat of the mountain. She walked with deliberate calm, aware of archers tracking her but bows restrained. Halfway across, she paused where the rock widened just enough for a meeting. Aldrich urged his horse forward until he could dismount on the flat stone. Up close, the lines in his face seemed deeper, his eyes rimmed with sorrow and confusion, rather than the cold dismissal she remembered from childhood. Elora's chest tightened. She wanted to throw arms around him, feel the orchard sunlight again, but a decade of distance stood like iron bars. He took a step toward her. Elora, are you harmed? Not by Rhaegar, she answered. Not since leaving the manor. She let the words hang, heavy with indictment. His mouth opened, closed. Your stepmother told me you were deceived, that the dragon's magic ensnared your mind. She used fear. She's used it on you for years. Elora searched his eyes. Father, did you ever see my bruises? Did you ever ask who left them? His shoulders sagged. Marissa said, she lied. Elora said, voice rising like heat off stone. And you chose to believe her because it was easier than facing how you failed to protect me. He flinched as though struck. Silence stretched across the chasm until even the mountain seemed to hold its breath. A king can rule with fear, Elora said, softer now, but a father must see truth even when it hurts. Aldrich's gaze slid past her to the distant parapet where Rhaegar waited, half shadow, watchful, still. He is a beast, Aldrich said, but the protest sounded paper thin. Elora's hand went to the healed patch of skin on her wrist. He is a man fighting a curse that was forced on him through betrayal. We both know what betrayal can do. She let him read the unspoken name. Marissa. Marissa's mare clopped onto the bridge. She dismounted with feline grace, crimson cloak trailing. "Do not let this child's dramatics confuse you," she said, voice honeyed. "The dragon poisons minds with false memoirs." She reached to grip Aldrich's arm. "We claim what is ours." Elora noted the flick of Aldrich's eyes where Marissa's fingers dug. Hesitation cracked in him like ice. Marissa's gaze met Elora's, cold satisfaction nesting there. Her hand slipped beneath her cloak. Silver flashed. Elora saw the dagger a heartbeat before it flew. Reflex thrust her sideways, but not quick enough. The blade would have struck her heart had a blur of shadow and fire not intervened. Rhaegar landed between them, cloak swirling, hand snapping out to catch steel mid-flight. Sparks hissed when metal met his palm, and was crushed to shards that clattered onto stone. Chaos erupted. Soldiers surged. Archers raised bows. The fortress wall rang with shouts as defenders knocked arrows in response. Heat roiled off Rhaegar, scales racing under his skin. A horn butted at his temple, then retreated as he battled rage. Marissa backed away, eyes wide but cunning. "See the monster unveiled." "No," Aldrich whispered, stunned. "I saw him save her." Elora grabbed Rhaegar's wrist, feeling heat fierce but not scalding. "Breathe," she whispered. "I'm all right." His blazing gaze flicked from her to the soldiers whose hands twitched on bowstrings. He forced a breath that smoked the air. Scales sank beneath skin. The horn smoothed. He straightened, letting everyone see he chose restraint. Elora turned to the lines of archers. "Lower your weapons, your lady drew first blood." The front rank hesitated. Aldrich stepped forward, voice ringing. "Stand down." Bows dipped. Feathered shafts trembled but did not fly. Elora exhaled shakily. Rhaegar addressed Marissa, voice hard. "You attempt murder under a flag of parley. Such treachery merits dragon judgment." Marissa laughed, brittle edge cracking around the sound. "What will you do? Burn me where I stand? Prove every tale true?" Elora faced Marissa, stepping clear of Rhaegar's shadow. "I think truth stands plain. You would have killed me rather than let the story unravel." Marissa's smile coiled. "You always were ungrateful. I gave you House Dalcair's name when you were nothing." "I was everything to him," Elora said, jerking her chin at Aldrich, "until you taught him to doubt his own eyes." Aldrich's mouth opened, but words seemed to fail again. He slid a wary glance to Marissa's dagger shards glittering at his feet like broken vows. "Elora," he said, voice hoarse, "did she harm you? Truly?" Elora met his gaze. "Yes, often. And you did nothing." Marissa stepped sideways, hissing, "Lies sown by enchantment. I could show the bruises if dragon healing hadn't erased them," Elora replied. "But truth leaves deeper marks." She touched the pendant, which glowed brighter the steadier her voice grew. "Look at me, father. Do I seem enchanted?" Tension wavered in the air like heat distortion. Aldrich's shoulders slumped. "No." A single arrow hissed from a tremulous bow near the rear. Whether rogue zeal or accident, it sliced the sky toward Elora. Rhaegar roared. A sound of furnace doors slammed open. Wing-shaped shadows rippled across his back. But he did not transform. He thrust a palm upward. A sheet of fire hissed into being, thin as glass. The arrow hit mid-flight, ignited, and spiraled into glittering ash before it could touch her. Gasps rippled over both armies. Even Marissa's eyes widened. Rhaegar lowered his hand, the firewall vanishing back into nothing. He turned slowly, letting every watching soul see the unfallen arrow, the unhurting torchbearer. "Control," he said, voice even, "comes from love, not terror." Elora's chest constricted. He'd chosen the word deliberately, declaring that the curse no longer commanded him. Choosing her. Father, she said, seizing the moment, what more proof do you need? Aldrich took a halting step toward her, then another. Tears glazed his eyes. I see you. He reached out, fingertips trembling, and lightly touched the chain at her throat. I see what I missed. Marissa advanced, eyes spitting fury. Fool, his flame corrupts your wits just as it did hers. She whirled on the soldiers. Seize them. No one moved. Half the men had seen Rhaegar spare their lord